Evidence of the increasing effects of climate change is building, as are the investing opportunities and changes in consumer habits linked to environmental concerns and resource use. Here are select dispatches about the companies responding to customer demands and climate risk, the ESG investors and their advisors, and the policymakers, enterprising individuals and scientists preparing for tomorrow. How many Americans believe in climate change? Probably more than you think, research in Indiana suggests. Indiana doesn't look like a state that's ready to confront climate change, or at least that's the perception. Its former governor, Vice President Mike Pence, has questioned whether human actions affect the climate. In 2016, the majority of Indiana residents voted for Donald Trump, who rejects mainstream climate science. And the state ranks first in the proportion of its population that identifies as conservative, a position that generally means resisting calls to address climate change. But research by Matthew Hauser of Indiana University, discussed in Hauser's own words here, finds that about 80% of respondents in the state reported believing that climate change was occurring, somewhat, or, to a great extent, similarly. A majority there felt that climate change will harm Indiana's economy, somewhat, or to a great extent, 77%, and that climate change was already causing harm in the United States or would by 2030, 72%. Over 65%, somewhat, or strongly agree that climate change effects are greater now than 5 years ago, and 75% supported initiatives to address these impacts in Indiana. But here's the twist, respondents aren't confident that their fellow citizens believe in climate change, which can pose challenges to policy. On average, respondents underestimated by about 24% how many Hoosiers accept climate change. Voters thought that most others shared their skepticism, estimating that only around 43% in Indiana held the opposite opinion. Our respondents are not alone in misperceiving how many of their peers hold supportive attitudes, writes Hauser. Many people nationwide underestimate consensus on this issue. One way to overcome this tendency may be to focus on communicating the commonness or the growing belief in climate change. Read, number of young Republicans concerned about environment jumps in last 5 years. Natural gas exec expected to co-host Biden fundraiser despite climate outcry. A Thursday fundraiser for former Vice President and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is still expected to feature as co-host Andrew Goldman, who co-founded a natural gas company, despite Biden's pledge just this week to refuse money from fossil fuel executives, CNBC reported, citing Biden associates who said plans could change last minute. Goldman is listed as a co-founder of Western LNG on the company's website, alongside entries for the firm's CEO and senior vice president. After being asked about the fundraiser at CNN's Climate Town Hall Wednesday, Biden said he didn't believe Goldman was an executive and that he had no role with the company. The former vice president later said, "I will not in any way accept his help if it turns out Goldman is an executive." Climate change, and how to combat it, take center stage at Democratic candidates' forums, and half of the 2020 Democratic frontrunners favor a carbon tax. 22 million pounds of plastic enter the Great Lakes each year, mostly in Lake Michigan. Plastics pollution in global waters has become one of the most complex issues of the 21st century. Researchers say that plastic litter in the oceans is poised to outweigh the amount of fish by 2050. And microplastics, particles that start out smaller than 5 millimeters are broken down from larger items, have been found in the falling rain in Colorado, carried by the wind to remote regions of the Pyrenees Mountains in France, and surfaced in drifting snow in the Arctic. However, it's only been in the last decade that research into plastics pollution has gained urgency in the Great Lakes, the planet's largest system of fresh water. Plastic debris makes up about 80% of the litter on Great Lakes shorelines, reports a Chicago Tribune article, citing data from the Alliance for the Great Lakes and others. Nearly 22 million pounds enter the Great Lakes each year, more than half of which pours into Lake Michigan, according to estimates calculated by the Rochester Institute of Technology. Microplastics have been observed in the guts of many Lake Michigan fish, in drinking water and even in beer, the article says. Perhaps the most worrisome aspect is that the impact of microplastics on human health remains unclear. Read, can't just blame boomers and their parents. Humans have been changing Earth for thousands of years and the sloppy green habit of wish cycling lets block ads. Why?